I affirm resolved. The federal government should adopt the Development, Relief, and Education for Alien Minors Act. Also known as the DREAM Act, the legislation, most recently introduced by California's Representative Lucille Roybal Allard, would protect young immigrants who are vulnerable to deportation. According to the American Immigration Council, the DREAM Act would provide current, former, and future undocumented high school graduates and GED recipients a three-step pathway to U.S. citizenship through college, work, or the armed services. The first step is conditional permanent residence, followed by lawful permanent residence, and finally naturalization. The National Immigration Law Center reports each year about 65,000 U.S.-raised students who would qualify for the DREAM Act's benefits graduate from high school. Before I address my main warrants, I would like to observe that the DREAM Act is popular. A September 2017 Politico Morning Consult poll found 76% of American people support Congress passing the DREAM Act. With citizenship and legalization, all is a part of it. It is also bipartisan, with 69% of Republicans and 84% of Democrats favoring the legislation. At the point of such overwhelming support, our federal government as a representative democracy has a contractual obligation to pass it. Doing otherwise flies in the face of the one universal purpose of government to serve the people. My first contention is for the economy. President Calvin Coolidge once famously said, "The business of the American people is business." By passing the DREAM Act, we are giving hundreds of thousands of people the ability to start their own businesses and giving existing businesses a more robust labor force. According to a 2010 UCLA study, students that would be impacted by the DREAM Act could add between $1.4 to $3.6 trillion in taxable income to our economy over the course of careers, depending on how many ultimately gain legal status. A 2017 Center for American Progress study found that over a decade, the DREAM Act could add as much as $1 trillion to the nation's economy by securing a greater quantity and quality of job opportunities for dreamers. My second contention is against the debt. Another one of President Coolidge's priorities was eliminating the national debt, as topical now as ever. We are currently facing a crisis regarding the national debt, which currently stands at $21.6 trillion, or 105% of the nation's GDP. The Congressional Budget Office recently announced that this year's deficit will top $1 trillion. This is highly problematic, as a 2017 study by UC Berkeley's Christina and David Romer found that high debt-to-GDP ratios are associated with 10 times greater GDP loss during a recession, in large part because governments lack the political will to take out debt for sufficient stimulus packages, meaning investor confidence decreases even more. Though we remain a long way from President Coolidge's 16% debt-to-GDP ratio, passing the DREAM Act will help reduce that federal debt. According to the CBO, the DREAM Act will cut the deficit by $1.4 billion and increase government revenues by $2.3 billion over the next 10 years. My third contention is for the troops. To again quote President Coolidge, "The nation which forgets its defenders will be itself forgotten." Former Secretary of Defense Robert Gates has written to DREAM Act sponsors, citing the rich precedent of non-citizens serving in the U.S. military, and stating, "The DREAM Act represents an opportunity to expand the recruiting pool to the advantage of military recruiting and readiness." Currently, roughly 35,000 non-citizens are serving in active duty military, and about 8,000 join each year. Enacting this legislation will help provide many of them with a path to naturalization and further incentivize non-citizens to sign up. By promoting the American economy through education and jobs, reducing the federal deficit, and supporting our country's defenders, passing the DREAM Act will take up the torch of President Calvin Coolidge and a lost generation of values in government where it was often dropped. To reiterate, it could boost the U.S. economy by as much as $1 trillion over the next 10 years. It will reduce our federal deficit, and it will support our soldiers where they are often left out. I would like to conclude with a final story. We need the DREAM Act for Ivan Rosales. With the DREAM Act, young people like Ivan Rosales, who came to the United States when he was a year old, can become doctors and work towards a cure for cancer. Ivan's brother, a National Guardsman, and his brother-in-law, an Iraq veteran, inspired his dream to serve as a doctor in the military, before going on to work as a cancer researcher. Without the DREAM Act, Ivan and others like him have no way to even stay in the country, much less serve it. Thus, I urge you to affirm.